So yes, we want to make sure that we are actually recording. But I'm super excited to be here today. I'm the founder and CEO of Braven. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Braven and what we do and why this topic means so much to me. So here we go. In the chat, I want people to tell me a little bit about yourself. But before you do that, I just want to play this little funny GIF that I love. So I don't want you to tell me everything because I want you to do it in 3 sentences or less, but I still want you to tell me about yourself. Tell me everything. All right. So hopefully people will put in the chat in 3 sentences or less a little bit about yourself. And I'm not sure why. Here we are. I don't see anything in the chat. Can people not access it? Okay, great. Awesome. I love this. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist with a passion for criminal justice and education reform. Ashwani, you're a PhD researcher. My job is mostly focused on designing faster computational models for very complex physical systems. Anyone else, or hopefully others, will, in 3 sentences or less, tell me a little bit about yourself. Maybe we can get 1 or 2 more. That'd be great. Oh, I'm a historian with a passion for hiking, hospital administration, working in hospital administration, working cancer research, trying to move into the pharmaceutical industry, leverage my skills, live in Columbia, Missouri. Oh my God, I love it, love it. Who hates wearing shoes? That's so awesome. I believe being around people, caring for one another, enjoy creating things career-wise. Awesome. So in the world of interviewing, I've interviewed truly thousands of people. If I probably counted, I bet I would get into the world of potentially tens of thousands of people. It's something that I've been doing for a long time, pretty much my entire career. And it's something that I'm super passionate about. I love people. I love getting to know people. And this is actually the first question I ask people who interview with me is, tell me a little bit about yourself. And the reason I ask that question is because I actually often am not looking for people to say where they went to school or how high their GPA is, etc. I'm actually looking to hear a little bit more about where the person starts and whether or not they're bringing their authentic self to the interview, because I want to make sure as an interviewer, I'm doing whatever I can to make them feel comfortable to do that. Because I often find that when I'm building teams, which I've built lots of them over time, and I'm building one now in the world of Braven, I am looking for unique individuals to come and be a part of the Braven team alongside me. So when somebody asks me to tell them a little bit about myself, I start out with, I grew up in some of the poorest neighborhoods in Chicago and among some of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. And it's a Black neighborhood that I grew up in, and people were doing everything possible to put their children on the pathway to the American dream. Between the ages of 4 and 14, my parents happened to purchase a piece of property where our economic trajectory of my family actually shifted dramatically. And so I'm super passionate about educational equity and economic mobility. And the reason I'm passionate is that I really love, and I don't know why there's a box blocking this slide. Is this helpful? Did the box go off? I need someone to give me an auditory. Did it go off or is it still there?
Yes, it's gone.
Okay, yeah, I think it was just because I was trying to read the chat. So I had the chat box up. That's how I knew the box was blocking. Anyway, so basically between 4 and 14, my parents' economic trajectory shifted, as did mine. And so this long-legged 10-year-old girl, all of a sudden, by the time I was 14, was living in a very different economic circumstance than where I had started. And so what I know about economic mobility is that it is possible for that to happen for many people. And so then as a result, and this is another tell me a little bit more about yourself type moment, I decided to teach in New Orleans, Louisiana, a group of 6th graders. And this is one of my 6th graders that kept growing up. And she happened to grow up in some of the lowest income neighborhoods in New Orleans. This group may or may not remember Hurricane Katrina. It was one of the worst national disasters to ever hit the US. And down in New Orleans, she lived in one of the neighborhoods that was completely underwater, that really still to this day has not fully come back. And when she was going to college at Northwestern University and Katrina hits her last year of college, we thought that simply because she was getting an outstanding degree, just like you all are at Hopkins, that she was going to be okay economically. And her mom, Deborah Guter, so this is Katika Guter, my former student, they'd done everything right for a decade to try to get her on the path to economic mobility, for this storm to hit, for Deborah and a lot of New Orleanians to be thrown into economic peril. But basically, as long as Katika decided to go to work here in Chicago or somewhere else, I thought she was going to be okay. She thought she was going to be okay. And she actually struggled initially to get a really strong first job. And I saw this with a bunch of my other students. And one of the things that I realized was in interviews, I didn't think she and other young people like her were telling people a little bit more about themselves than just where they went to school, more about their lives, how they were even at that moment to face that interview, and that they weren't showing up as confident. And she wasn't showing up as confident as she should show up, given her life trajectory is just extraordinary. She had overcome so many barriers. She figured that out and ends up in a great first job that leads her into Harvard for graduate school. And now she's way off into her career doing exceptionally well. But this first question that I ask in interviews, tell me a little bit more about yourself, is a question that I'm really hoping each and every one of you will think about answering in the beginning of an interview versus waiting. So in the chat, so then I got to be careful with the chat box on my end. I'd love for people to say, who is this? Just type it in the chat. Who is this? And I'm going to try to move my little box over so that you all can see. Who is this? I hope the chat box is working. Anyone out there? Who is this? Type it in the chat. Okay, love it. Queen Bee, Beyonce. Awesome. All right. So this is Beyonce. And I think many people, of course, just know the likeness of her image, know she's an extraordinary artist, know that she and her family are all very famous. And when you really get behind who Beyonce is, one of the things that you may or may not know is that, like all of us, she at moments faces imposter syndrome, and she's wondering whether or not she's good enough and whether or not, she's going to have the courage to get out and really perform to her fullest ability. And so she's created this alter ego for herself called Sasha Fierce. So one of her albums even says, I am Sasha Fierce. And Sasha Fierce is this internal person, or some people might call it an imposter. I'm going to say this is an internal other part of her that really comes out on stage, that gives her all of the magnificence of who she is. And she really makes sure that she's building her confidence before she even goes out on stage to really become Sasha Fierce. But really, she's Beyonce. Sasha Fierce is just the way that she's really going after maximizing all that she is so that all of us can enjoy her for the fullness of who she is and her unique ability. And so what I am super excited about as I think about each and every one of you and about interviewing is, how do you bring out your inner Sasha Fierce? How do you make sure that people really understand what is unique about you, what is interesting about you? I saw in the chat before I close the chat so that you all can see the full thing here, that someone went to like 11 different schools or 12 different schools. That would be interesting to me as an interviewer and as someone who's looking to hire a really talented team, because it actually lets me know that you understand change. You understand how to get into a new community or a new group of people and figure out how to become a part of them, or that's a follow-up question I would at least ask you. And so that said, I want to give us another image of what it means to tell someone about yourself. Now, this is a video, so clearly you can't do a video when you're in an interview, but I do think the arc of this video helps hopefully you think about, how could I tell my story? And I think as long as you're doing it within 3 minutes or 4 minutes in the beginning, towards the beginning of an interview, I actually think you're totally fine on time. I think sometimes when people don't feel like they can come off of their resume a little bit and really tell somebody who they are, that they think they're taking up too much time, when often that is an interesting thing about you. So let's watch this together.
My dad once came home and I was a junior in high school. He was breaking down concrete at one of his clients' homes. And he walked up to me and he's like, look at my hands. Look how dry my hands are. And I wondered, I'm like, why are you showing me your hands, Dad? And he looked up at me and he said, I work with my hands so that you can work with your mind.
Para mis hijos, pues yo quiero lo mejor, que hagan una carrera en su vida para que tengan lo que ellos anhelen tener en un futuro. Como ahorita mi hija Cristal, ella quiere trabajar para comprar una casa. Para mí ese es el sueño americano que quiero lograr.
If you met freshman Crystal, you would probably think, I'm like, who is this girl? My idea then was that, I'm gonna go to school, and then once I graduate, jobs are just gonna fly at me. I had one of my good friends sit me down and say, you need to start networking like crazy right now. It was around that time that I started noticing my friends doing all these great internships. I had never heard of that before, so I panicked.
So much of the focus for first-gen students is around getting your college degree. It can be really hard to figure out where to go, what to do. Having somebody to talk to about that who can empathize and who's been through it, I think is really helpful.
I went online and I Googled SJSU internship help. One of the first things that popped up was Braven.
Braven is a career accelerator. It's basically making sure that when you get out of college, that you are able to land a really great first job. I was a leadership coach, so I met with my fellows once a week about the work that was going on. There's so many opportunities for them to grow.
My focus was more on academics, but once I started going through the program, I realized there's other things that I also need to dedicate my focus to. There were also a lot of first-generation students like myself, so I felt that connection right away. I was like, oh, cool, there's people just like me.
As a first-generation college student, Braven introduced me to so many people that led me to my current career path. I am gonna be starting at Adobe in mid-July. When I was doing my Adobe interview, they actually told me, you know what, I see that you structure your answers in a certain format, and I appreciate that. So I was like, wow, thank you, Braven.
I'm always very proud of all my friends when they secure a strong job, such as the one that Jamila secured, and I want to see them succeed. So when she got that job and I hadn't yet, honestly, I was a little stressed out.
I have this thing where I feel guilt even over my successes, because since she's my best friend, I want her to have the same opportunities that I do, and I know she's capable of that.
I've learned a lot from Braven, but one of the things that really stood out to me was every no is a step closer to yes. I was interviewing for Box. I got this amazing call yesterday, and she's like, oh, Crystal, I have some news for you. We want you to be part of our team. So yeah, I got a job.
Mañana que yo mire a Cristal caminar ahí, me voy a sentir muy orgullosa de ella. Se ha esforzado mucho, mucho para lograr llegar hasta donde está.
I know Crystal really recognizes that she's gotten a lot. I hope that she can see that she has so much to offer other people. So not just giving back for the sake of giving back, but also as an affirmation that you made it.
The network is growing. The students that are impacted by the program continue to grow, and it attracts a lot of passionate, smart, and strong individuals. I want to make myself proud, but I also have to make my parents proud. Had they not come here, I would definitely not be in the position that I am now.
All right. So the reason I shared the video about Crystal, oh dear, let me try to get myself out of full screen, is because when she started to go into the world of interviewing, one of the things we really, really try to make sure that our students in the world of Braven learn is this whole question, tell me a little bit about yourself. So Crystal felt much more empowered as she was interviewing for Box and other companies along the way to talk more about her own personal story, about her parents and all that they've done to get her to where she is, and all that she's done herself to get herself to where she is, and not shy away from that, including being a first-generation American. And so that said, this is another person that I've watched really maximize this first entering question that I ask. And if an interviewer doesn't ask you it, I would highly suggest you figure out a way to weave into it of tell me a little bit about yourself, is actually Dylan Bramble Brown. So he was one of our students in the world of Braven. He also is from an immigrant family. He transfers into Rutgers, Newark as a Pell Grant student and as a transfer student. And he was just really unsure of what he might do next. He was a psychology major. He ends up coming into the Braven experience as a sophomore. And then one of the things we really express to the young people we work with, and I'm really trying to make sure that you all hear this too, is go out there, use your networks, tell people about yourself, ask people about themselves. People love to talk about themselves, loves to hear about other people. And so for Dylan, he did that really well, where he got so many internships, he had to actually figure out how to let some people know that he couldn't intern for them. He also was able to negotiate having 2 internships at a time. But the big win for him ultimately came into, he was dreaming a much smaller dream for himself in terms of where he might go to law school as he decided to go to law school. And we started to say, Dylan, you should actually think of some other law schools other than just the initial ones that are just surrounding your immediate area. So he decided to apply to a bigger pool, including Georgetown. He gets in. But then this 80% on the side, he was really shocked. He gets to Georgetown and all of a sudden he realizes that the vast majority of students that he's sitting alongside are paying full fare at Georgetown, whereas he is still heavily on financial aid and feeling a little bit of insecurity about that. But then as he got into that situation and then started to interview for these fabulous law firms, and this whole question, tell me a little bit about yourself, started to come up, he started to talk about being from an immigrant family, helping his parents navigate in moments of needing to translate for them on tax forms and otherwise. And so just really realizing that the power of his story, the power of what made him unique is why people wanted to hire him. And so I really want to make sure that you all know that what I've seen from my interviewing thousands of people, watching others interview people, is actually that your unique diversity, the uniqueness of who you are, actually really does matter as people are building teams. So I'm really hoping that imposter syndrome is going to rest in peace for you. That even if it means that you're like a Beyonce who needs to come up with another way of psyching yourself up to feel really confident in telling your story, whatever it takes for you to do that, I really hope that you will think about interviewing and your unique story through the lens of telling someone a little bit about yourself that they wouldn't find on your resume. That is what makes you unique. Because what I've seen is that what I want to hear, what others want to hear, is really a little bit about you, what makes you unique. And what I've seen over time is that sometimes people feel like this first image of a white man who people might perceive in a certain way is like how they think they need to show up for an interview, or maybe even a white woman. But both of these people could have unique stories and unique backgrounds that I would want on my team for various different reasons. But then also people who are coming from all over the planet, all over the globe, or coming into the United States as immigrants, their stories really matter in terms of building diverse and equitable teams and places. And so I really, really want to encourage you all to show up and tell people a little bit about you and feel emboldened to wear, if that is the clothes that you feel most comfortable in that represent your country or where you are from, to do that. Because the best employers are going to see that the beauty in this tapestry is what makes our country stronger, what makes businesses stronger. We are only as strong as our most diverse teams. And so that said, I really believe that the next generation of leaders can emerge from everywhere and will emerge from everywhere. and can be as diverse as our future demands. However, it really will mean that we all have to get more comfortable in our own skin and answering this first question. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. So that said, I'd love to use our last 15 minutes together or so to answer any questions that people have, to start a more robust dialogue. I'm actually going to stop sharing. So hopefully if people are comfortable being on screen, they can come on and raise your hand and give other thoughts or feedback, or ask me a question. Like, seriously, how do I tell people about myself in such a short period of time? But I really want to make sure that I'm stressing that I've seen over time that it's actually people not telling people the more interesting parts of who they are and what makes them special that actually holds them back from getting the job that they would hope to receive. So I look forward to hearing your questions. And I love that someone in the chat said, as an introvert, I put on another persona. What questions do you have? Yeah. So this is a great question that just came in. How do you suggest people start preparing how to tell others a little bit about themselves? So in the beginning, when I first showed that slide of myself, of course, in every interview, you can't show a slide of your like 10-year-old self. Yet the arc of that story, which lasts about 3 minutes, can be constructed. And so what I've learned is literally preparing to tell people in 3 minutes, no more than 4 minutes, about yourself that is not on your resume. Because the truth is people can read your resume, people can look at your LinkedIn profile. If you're heavy on social, they can go look at your social media. There's a lot that a great interviewer is going to gather in advance of time talking with you. And so what I always say to people is seriously sit and construct, what is your 3 minute, tell me a little bit about yourself that you cannot find on your resume, that no one can find just Googling you online, that actually would make you an interesting person on a team. I have to say, I've learned over time that the most ineffective teams and boring teams are ones that are not diverse. And actually it is someone's diversity, whether that's diversity of thought, diversity of where they're coming from, that actually makes Braven's product better and a bunch of others as well. So I would just make sure that you're practicing that as much as you might practice once you get to the harder, like the other parts of your resume that might be like the hard skills, as people sometimes call them, which drives me a little bit crazy, but where you're citing the numbers or the research that you've done or whatever extraordinary other thing that you've done. You usually practice that more than you imagine, telling people a little bit more about your story. So that's the framework that we use, which is it's called the PAR framework, but basically making sure that you're really putting it in the framework of like, who am I? Like, what was a challenge that I might have faced, the action that I took, how it then took me further. But really, it can be any framework that allows you in about 3 minutes to tell people something that's not really on your resume that would make you interesting to them. So that they are informative, concise. Yes, I think anything to keep in mind to you frame your personal details. So I think, again, concise really comes down to like writing it out long form. It might be 10 minutes and you're like, okay, I got to get this to 3, and getting feedback from others. I think in my personal story, what I always try to get people to understand is actually, I'm a person who's actually learned over time what it means to be economically mobile, which means that I've been in a lot of different spaces. That means I am very comfortable with all kinds of people when it comes to quote unquote economics or money. I am very comfortable being in low income neighborhoods or higher income neighborhoods. But that's something that I want people to know about me, is that I'm really flexible and I love just all kinds of people. And so I think, to the point of like not oversharing, I think this is where it's so important to really write out your story, what makes you, telling people a little bit more about yourself. And making it concise. But also, I think it's interesting. I think in the world of oversharing, I think that only happens if you aren't being deliberate about what you are sharing and what you're trying to let people know, which in the world of work is, I can be on a team, I'm analytical, I'm going to get the job done, but also I'm going to be an interesting and valuable contributor as well. When they aren't going deep enough with their, yes. So that's a, yes. So, I would love if more interviewers got more training on how to get a little bit deeper. So in the chat earlier, when I was asking people to tell me a little bit about themselves, and I was seeing lots of great things, like, because you all are extraordinary, you're people, you're at Hopkins, about like, I'm majoring in this, or I'm focused on this rather in the world of graduate schools. I would know to say, that's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey to Johns Hopkins Graduate School? Like, tell me a little bit more about what led you there. And that's how I usually dig deeper into the tell me a little bit more about yourself, because if I'm hearing things that are only related to school or to work, I just know to then keep clicking on, well, what led you there? What led you there? Because what I'm trying to pull out is like, usually there's some reason that people end up where they are that's deeper than only about the degree that they're going after. And it could be that, you know, what you're pursuing on the cancer front, I saw that earlier, is because someone was impacted by cancer in your family, right? Like, I want to know a little bit more about what is making you feel really, really on a mission to come on our team, or honestly go on any team and do a great job. So that's how I go about it. So if you're someone who interviews, there is a way to just keep asking, no, actually tell me how you actually got, what made you do this? What do you say to the question about your weaknesses? So I'm really transparent, and I'm a people person. I love people. And it means that one of my weaknesses is that I love people so much that I will spend a lot of time on the people side of things. And I'm not always as much in love with like the operational side of things. And so what I've learned in terms of being on a team is that if it comes to like needing to do a lot of interviews with people, or needing to somebody who's going to be very extroverted and then synthesize what they're hearing from all those people, I'm your gal for sure. I'm going to do that really well. And if you're asking me to put together the timeline, we need someone else on the team who's going to make sure that the timeline is there and is keeping me on track. Like, hey, okay, this is great. I'm glad that you did all these interviews. We need you to sum up your notes in this amount of time. And I'm really transparent. That said, I think it's important to know, well, what are your 3 greatest strengths, but also what are your couple greatest weaknesses that usually are not like so prohibitive that someone can't see hire you? Because I actually find that I actually say to people when they're interviewing with me, I want to hear about your greatest areas. That's why we're talking, but actually I'm more interested in where you feel like you have room to grow. So that's the other thing, is talking about, instead of a weakness, where you have room to grow. And as a hiring manager, and as somebody who has overseen a lot of hiring managers and gets asked to consult all the time to even big companies on how they do their interviews and questions that they're asking, this question around weaknesses, I would always answer it in the area in which I could continue to grow and is not to my greatest strength is playing that project manager role. And I've worked with project managers, and so I definitely hear this question about sharing personal information can be very much a double-edged sword in a professional environment. I do agree with that. I think people always have to use good judgment. I actually think, though, that people don't realize, like, there is some information that actually makes you more valuable in a work environment, that makes you more interesting as a part of a team. And in our country, you know, I think about people who are returning from the prison industrial complex, which means that something happened that landed them in prison. And I think of all people that have to tell a personal story or share something about themselves, tell me a little bit about yourselves, that might be hesitant to do that. I feel like, and I've worked with people who have returned from the prison industrial complex, and we have people in the Braven experience. And let me tell you what I realize every single time, people who have the courage to say that and then talk about what they learned along the way and or the injustices of that system and what makes them want to do X, Y, or Z are incredibly credible. And so I think, again, it's about being intentional about what you're sharing. But I think sometimes it's some of the harder parts of things that we've had to overcome and barriers that we've had to overcome that actually, depending on what kind of role you're trying to go into, are actually more important to why you might rise above another candidate than someone else. So I hope that helps, that that story, because I know it can be a double-edged sword, but it's hard for me to think about another population of people where it might be a greater double-edged sword than someone who's returning from the prison industrial complex. How can we leverage our skills in certain industries and showcase it as a strength for entry? Yeah. So I have to say transferable skills are a real thing. And honestly, on my team, often people who might need to go and raise money will say, I've never raised money. I'm like, you know what? The best fundraiser at Braven, who heads our external affairs team, actually never even, sold Girl Scout cookies or like raised any kind of money before she hit that role. And what makes her really good at the role, and this is the transferable skills, is that she's an incredibly great storyteller. She has incredible communication skills. She is the yin to my yang. Like we are real partners in this work, because she's also an incredible project manager. So she's like, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And so I just think, again, sort of who you surround yourself with is important and who will be on your team. But this transferable skills piece, I really do believe that more skills are transferable into different industries than people realize. It's just understanding the role and then showcasing how your skills really do fit, even if you've never done it before. So I love this question about not too much about personal stuff and not enough about the job qualities. I tend to get very nervous and tend to ramble. This is why I'm like, get your little personal story, which is really important. Tell me a little bit. That's the word little, a little bit about yourself, but enough where people are like, this is such an interesting person. In 3 minutes, 4 minutes or less. And then you're going to go into the other parts of the interview. But again, I find I want more and want to spend more time when I find that person is themselves unique and interesting. If I feel like I'm seeing kind of the same kind of person again and again and again, I'm not as interested. So we all can get into the world of getting very nervous, like Beyonce. She's got Sasha Fierce on her side. So then prepping and practicing that story, because then it's going to pivot into, and then that's what makes me this, and this, and this is why I've majored in X, Y, or Z, or I've been focusing in this, and this is how I drive towards results. But I really don't want people to forget that actually it's the you part, what makes you unique, what makes you who you are, that anyone who's trying to build a serious team is going to want to know as well. Yes. I have an invisible disability. How and when should I share that information? Full disclosure, my youngest daughter is dyslexic. And so I actually think about this quite a bit. And depending on what that invisible disability is, and again, I would use a thought partner to think through this with you. In her case, and she's 10, so she has a while before she's going to be applying for jobs. I honestly think she should, in her, tell me a little bit about yourself. Part of the opening of any interview, I actually think she should just say that. Now she's fortunate to be growing up dyslexic in a time where I think people are more open to that, more open to understanding. There are all the different accessibility tools that she will be able to use, and she is brilliant. I mean, I have 3 kids, they're all awesome. And there's something about the way in which she has to maneuver the world that will make her a powerful part of a team. And so I just think it's really making sure you know how to communicate that invisible disability, and honestly trying that on with some trusted sources, even doing some informational interviews with people who are hiring managers and asking them their advice. But my gut tells me that you should share it, because I think, one, it just is what makes you you and makes you unique. And 2, what I have found, even in my own workplace, I have someone on my team who is outstanding in every way, who has degenerative hearing loss. And we've had to change what we do. Like, we then use closed captioning all of the time when she is on, and that is better for Braven. Till you lose her skill set simply because we didn't realize that was an invisible challenge that she had, would have been just truly awful for us. So I really hope that you'll think about having the courage and the most appropriate and right ways for you to share that. So I know that we're at the end of our time. Everyone should feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if I can be helpful to you as you're trying to craft that first few minutes of tell me a little bit about yourself, even if someone hasn't quite asked you that question. I'd love for you to feel free to reach out to me, and or I can also have other people on my team help you with that. I really do think it is what makes some people come over the line and get the roles that they deserve more than others. So I hope that you will tell people a little bit about yourself. Thank you so much for having me. I hope this was somewhat helpful. And yes, Ashwani, anything else for me?
No, yeah, thank you, Aimee. Thank you for very encouraging talk.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.